I'm here in the garden, and I'm going to read some Ishmael for you. Put my glasses on first. You've heard it from infancy, but have never managed to swallow it. You have the feeling something's been left out, glossed over. You have the feeling you've been lied to about something, and if you can, you'd like to know what it is. And that's what you're doing here in this room. Let me think about this for a second. Are you saying that this explaining story contains the lies I was talking about in my paper about Kurt and Hans? That's right. That's it exactly. This boggles my mind. I don't know any such story. Not any single story. It's a single, perfectly unified story. You just have to think mythologically. What? I'm talking about your culture's mythology, of course. I thought that was obvious. It wasn't obvious to me. Any story that explains the meaning of the world, the intentions of the gods, and the destiny of man is bound to be mythology. That may be so, but I'm not aware of anything remotely like that. As far as I know, there's nothing in our culture that could be called mythology. Unless you're talking about Greek mythology or Norse mythology or something like that. I'm talking about living mythology. Not recorded in any book, recorded in the minds of people of your culture, and being enacted all over the world, even as we sit here and speak of it. Again, as far as I know, there's nothing like that in our culture. Ishmael's tarry forehead crinkled into furrows as he gave me a look of amused exasperation. This is because you think mythology is a set of fanciful tales. The Greeks didn't think of their mythology this way. Surely you must realize that. If you went up to a man of Homeric Greece and asked him what fanciful tales he told his children about the gods and the heroes of the past, he wouldn't know what you were talking about. He'd say what you said. As far as I know, there's nothing like that in our culture. A Norseman would have said the same. Okay, but that doesn't exactly help. All right, let's cut the assignment down to a more modest size. The story, like every story, has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And each of these parts is a story in itself. Before we get together tomorrow, see if you can find the beginning of the story. The beginning of the story? Yes, think anthropologically. I laughed. What does that mean? If you were an anthropologist, after the story being enacted by the Alawa Aborigines of Australia, you would expect to hear a story with a beginning, middle, and an end. Okay. And would you expect the beginning of the story to be? Oh, and what would you expect the beginning of the story to be? I have no idea. Of course you do. You're just playing dumb. I sat there for a minute trying to figure out how to stop playing dumb. Okay, I said at last. I guess I'd expect it to be their creation myth. Of course. But I don't see how that helps me. Then I'll spell it out. You're looking for your own culture's creation myth. I stared at him balefully. We have no creation myth, I said. That's a certainty. It skips over to page 49. What's that? I said when I arrived the following morning. I was referring to an object resting on the arm of my chair. What does it look like? A tape recorder. That's exactly what it is. I'm going to read one more page because this one's really short. I mean, what's it for? It's for recording for posterity the curious folk tales of a doomed culture which you're going to tell me. I laughed and sat down. I'm afraid I haven't as yet found any curious folk tales to tell you. My suggestion that you look for creation myth bore no fruit? We have no creation myth, I said again, unless you're talking about the one in Genesis. Don't be absurd. If an eighth grade teacher invited you to explain how all this began, would you read the class the first chapter of Genesis? Certainly not. Then what account would you give them? I could give them an account, but it certainly wouldn't be a myth. Well, naturally, you wouldn't consider it a myth. No creation story is a myth to the people who tell it. It's just a story. Okay, but the story I'm talking about is definitely not a myth. Parts of it are still in question, I suppose. And I suppose later research might make some revisions in it, but it's certainly not a myth. Turn on the tape recorder and begin, then we'll know. I gave him a reproachful look. You mean you actually want me to tell the story? That's right. I can't just reel it off. I need some time to get it together. There's plenty of time. It's a 90-minute tape. I sighed, turned on the recorder, and closed my eyes. All right.